The rain had been falling steadily all evening, drumming softly against the neon-lit windows of Rosie's Diner, a small roadside stop just off the highway. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon. The usual late-night customers, a trucker reading his newspaper, a young couple sharing pie, and two college kids studying over milkshakes, gave the place a cozy, peaceful vibe. Behind the counter worked Emily, a 22-year-old waitress known for her warm smile and quick service. She was saving every tip to pay for nursing school. Her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and despite the long shift, she never let the exhaustion show. She hummed quietly as she refilled the coffee pot, grateful for a calm night. The calm didn't last. The bell over the diner door jingled sharply, letting in a burst of cold, damp air as three men strode in. They were rough-looking, leather jackets, muddy boots, and the kind of swagger that made everyone glance up. The tallest one, with a crooked grin and a scar along his cheek, slammed himself into a booth and whistled at Emily in a way that made her stiffen. "Hey, sweetheart," he called, smirking. "How about some coffee? Extra sweet, just like you." The other two laughed too loudly, already disturbing the quiet hum of the diner. Emily forced a polite smile and nodded. "Of course. I'll be right with you." As she turned to grab the coffee pot, one of the men muttered something crude under his breath. The young couple in the corner exchanged uncomfortable glances. The trucker lowered his newspaper just enough to watch, then went back to pretending to read. Emily set their mugs on the table, keeping her voice steady. "Here you go, gentlemen." The leader leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Gentlemen? That's cute. We're just looking for a little fun tonight, honey. Why so serious?" Her stomach nodded, but she stepped back quietly. No one else in the diner said a word. Everyone could feel the tension creeping in. Outside, the rain continued to pour, but inside Rosie's Diner, the air had shifted. A chill ran through the room that had nothing to do with the weather. No one in the diner could have guessed who was about to walk through that door. Emily tried to focus on her work, refilling the salt shakers at the counter as the three men's laughter echoed through the diner. She knew better than to respond to rude remarks. Most of the time, if you ignored them, they'd get bored and leave. But tonight felt different. The tallest thug, the one with the scar on his cheek, called out again. "Hey, sweetheart, what's taking so long with that pie? Don't make us wait all night." Emily forced a polite smile. "I'll bring it right out, sir." Her voice was soft but steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she cut a slice of cherry pie from the display case. She set it on a plate, added a scoop of vanilla ice cream, and carried it carefully to their booth. "Finally," the man said, leaning closer as she set the plate down. "See, that wasn't so hard. Now why don't you stay right here and keep us company?" Emily straightened up quickly, keeping her tone professional. "I have other customers to attend to. Enjoy your pie." The man's grin faded just a little. "You're a feisty one, huh?" "I like that." The other two men snickered. One of them stretched his arm across the booth, deliberately blocking her path back to the counter. "Come on, just sit for a minute. We don't bite, unless you want us to." The couple in the corner exchanged another glance, clearly uncomfortable. The college kids lowered their eyes to their textbooks, pretending not to notice. The trucker shifted in his seat, but he didn't say a word. Emily stepped sideways to get around the thug's arm, murmuring, "Please let me pass." He chuckled and moved his arm slowly, enjoying the little display of control. Back behind the counter, Emily exhaled shakily. She'd dealt with rowdy customers before, but something about these men set her on edge. She glanced toward the kitchen window where the diner's manager, a stout man named Ralph, was flipping burgers. He met her eyes but quickly looked away, as if hoping the problem would resolve itself. The laughter at the booth grew louder as the men began tossing sugar packets at each other. A couple of the other customers quietly gathered their things and slipped out into the rain, unwilling to stick around. Emily reached for the coffee pot again, trying to keep up her routine. Just as she turned, the scar-faced man called out, "Hey, coffee refill, sweetheart. Chop chop." She approached their table slowly, gripping the pot tightly. "Here you go," she said, pouring carefully. But as she leaned over, the man deliberately jostled her elbow, causing a splash of hot coffee to spill on the table. "Watch what you're doing." He barked, though it had been his own fault. His companions burst out laughing. I'm sorry," Emily stammered, reaching for a napkin to clean up the spill. "Sorry's not good enough. the man said, his grin turning cruel. "You owe me a fresh cup, and maybe an apology kiss while you're at it." The laughter that followed made Emily's face flush with humiliation. She bit her lip, determined not to let them see her cry. The trucker finally lowered his newspaper completely and glared at the men. "Hey, leave the girl alone. She's just doing her job." The scar-faced thug shifted his attention to the trucker. "Mind your own business, old man, unless you're looking for trouble." The trucker grunted and went back to his seat. The couple in the corner looked ready to bolt while the college kids exchanged nervous whispers. Emily's heart was racing. She glanced toward Ralph again, silently begging for help, but he busied himself at the grill, pretending not to hear. The men leaned back in their booth, enjoying the uneasy silence they'd created. One of them whistled mockingly. "Ain't it funny how nobody wants to play hero these days?" Emily retreated to the counter, gripping the edge so hard her knuckles turned white. She told herself to just make it through the night. A few more hours and they'd be gone. But the night wasn't over yet. The scar-faced thug suddenly slammed his palm on the table. "Hey, we've been asking for more napkins for, 10 minutes? You deaf or just ignoring us?" Emily jumped slightly at the sound but quickly grabbed a stack of napkins. She walked back toward their table, careful to keep her distance as she set them down. This time, one of the other men grabbed her wrist as she turned to leave. "Where are you going so fast?" "Stay a while. We're just having fun." Emily froze, her eyes wide. She gently tugged her wrist free and said as firmly as she could, "Please don't touch me." The man laughed and let go. "Relax, sweetheart. We're just being friendly." A tense silence filled the diner. The few remaining customers avoided eye contact, staring at their plates or their phones. The sense of safety that once defined Rosie's diner had evaporated completely. Put yourself in this situation. If you were sitting in the diner watching this unfold, would you step in to help Emily or call for help from a safe distance? Also, tell us which country and city you're watching this story from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. Emily tried to steady her breathing as she stood behind the counter, pretending to wipe down a clean coffee cup. Her heart thudded so loudly she could hear it over the clatter of cutlery and the hum of the neon sign buzzing near the window. The thugs had stopped joking for a moment. They were now whispering among themselves, casting glances at her as if deciding what to do next. The door to the kitchen swung open with a squeak, and Ralph, the manager, stepped out carrying 2 plates of burgers. He avoided eye contact with Emily as he served another table near the door. Emily could see it in his stiff shoulders. He didn't want trouble. That left her completely on her own. The leader of the trio, the one with the scar along his cheek, leaned back in the booth, balancing a spoon on his finger as though bored. Suddenly, he flicked the spoon onto the floor. "Hey, waitress," he barked, pointing at the spoon. "You dropped something. Pick it up." Emily hesitated, cheeks burning. "That's not—" she started, but his glare cut her off. The younger thug beside him laughed. "You heard the man. That's part of your job, ain't it? Cleaning up after customers." Her knees felt weak, but she bent down and picked up the spoon without a word. When she rose, she noticed the couple who had been sitting in the corner were gone, their table empty except for a few bills tucked under the sugar jar. They'd slipped out quietly, unwilling to stay in the tense atmosphere. Emily felt more alone than ever. She placed the spoon in a bus tub, then forced herself to keep moving as if everything were normal. But the men weren't done. "Hey, how about some music?" the scar-faced thug asked loudly, leaning halfway out of the booth. "This place is dead. Maybe you can dance for us." One of his buddies gave an ugly whistle. Emily froze, every muscle in her body tense. "Sir, please keep your voice down." "There are other customers," the thug scoffed. "Other customers? Looks to me like we're the only ones left worth serving." A tense silence settled again. Even the college kids at the back looked ready to bolt, their textbooks half closed. The trucker stared into his coffee as if willing himself invisible. The thug closest to the aisle shoved his empty mug toward her, knocking over the napkin holder. "Refill and smile when you do it." Emily bit the inside of her cheek to keep from snapping back. She reached for the coffee pot, her hand trembling slightly. Just as she started pouring, the leader made a show of yawning and stretched his arm out wide, nearly knocking the pot out of her hand. The hot liquid sloshed dangerously close to his lap. "Watch it," he snarled. "You trying to burn me now?" I'm sorry," she whispered. "That's twice you've messed up." he said, his grin twisting into something meaner. Third time and we might have to teach you a lesson. The way he said it made her stomach clench. She stepped back, clutching the coffee pot to her chest like a shield. For a long moment, no one moved. The rain outside hammered harder against the glass, thunder rolling in the distance. From the corner, the trucker cleared his throat. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but firm. The scar-faced thug slowly turned his head toward him. "You want to repeat that, old-timer?" The trucker didn't answer. Instead, he raised his mug to his lips and took a long sip, keeping his gaze fixed on the scar-faced man. The thug smirked and leaned back again. "Thought so." Emily's chest felt tight. She wished she could reach for her phone, but the men were watching her every move. Near the door, the neon sign flickered. The diner's heater clicked off, and the sudden quiet made every breath sound loud. Emily stepped behind the counter again, trying to appear busy stacking plates. Her mind raced. Should I call the police? What if they see me reaching for the phone? The younger thug drummed his fingers on the table and said in a mock-sweet voice, "Hey, you think she's gonna cry soon? I bet $5 she cracks before midnight." All three of them laughed while Emily clenched her fists behind the counter. One of the college kids finally pulled out his phone under the table, pretending to scroll but quietly recording the scene. Another clap of thunder rattled the windows. The scar-faced thug slammed his mug down. "This place is boring. How about you sing for us, sweetheart? Or maybe you'd like to sit down right here." He patted the empty space beside him in the booth. Emily shook her head. "Please, sir. I just want to do my job." The thug's grin widened. "You are doing your job, entertaining customers." Her face drained of color, but she didn't answer. The tension in the room was unbearable now. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. If you were sitting in that diner right now, would you speak up against the bullies or stay quiet to avoid trouble? Tell us in the comments below. Your answer might surprise you. Emily gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself, praying silently for the nightmare to end. Little did she know, the bell above the diner door was about to jingle, and everything in the room would change. The bell above the door gave a soft ding as the diner door swung open, letting in a blast of cool, rain-soaked air. Everyone's eyes instinctively turned toward the entrance. A tall figure stepped inside, dressed in a black leather jacket that glistened with raindrops. His shoulders were broad, and his presence filled the doorway before he even said a word. The man quietly removed his hood, revealing slicked-back hair peppered with gray. His calm, heavy-lidded eyes scanned the room once before he shut the door behind him, shutting out the storm. Emily froze where she stood behind the counter, her hands still gripping the edge. Something about the man's presence made her feel safer. The college kids in the corner exchanged quick whispers, their phones briefly lowered. The three thugs, however, looked unimpressed. The scar-faced leader leaned back in his booth and muttered something under his breath. The stranger walked toward the counter without a word, his boots echoing softly on the tiled floor. He didn't bother shaking the rain off his jacket, just slid onto one of the stools and waited. "Evening," he said in a voice that was low and steady. Almost a rumble. Emily swallowed her nerves and managed a polite smile. "What can I get you, sir?" "Just coffee," he replied. "Black." His tone was calm, but his eyes flicked briefly toward the booth where the thug sat. That single glance carried a weight that made Emily wonder if he already sensed the tension in the diner. She poured the coffee with hands that were still a little shaky. As she slid the cup across the counter, he nodded his thanks. For the first time all night, Emily felt the smallest flicker of relief, but the peace didn't last. The youngest of the thugs, the one who'd been drumming his fingers earlier, let out a mocking laugh. "Look what we got here, boys. Why, another hero in a leather jacket. Bet he thinks he's in a movie or something." His buddies snickered. The stranger ignored them, stirring his coffee with a small spoon. "Hey, leather jacket guy," the scar-faced leader called out. "You new around here? We like to keep things friendly. Why don't you come say hello?" The stranger didn't move. He sipped his coffee slowly as if he hadn't heard the challenge. This irritated the leader. "I'm talking to you," he barked, his voice rising enough to make the college kids flinch. Finally, the man turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I heard you," he said calmly. "Just not interested." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the room, not from the thugs. but from the trucker, who quickly hid his grin behind his mug. The scar-faced thug stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. Not interested? You got a mouth on you, old man. Emily's heart began to race again. She wanted to tell the stranger to just leave to avoid making things worse. But something about his composure told her he wasn't the kind of man to back down or lose his temper easily. He set down his spoon and turned on the stool to face the thug fully. "Sit down," he said evenly. "You've had enough fun for one night." The entire diner went quiet. The thug blinked in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "Sit," the man repeated, his voice carrying a weight that made even the younger two thugs shift uncomfortably in their seats. For a moment, the scar-faced leader just stood there, torn between anger and an unexpected flicker of caution. But then he laughed, shaking his head. "You don't tell me what to do. You think you're some kind of tough guy?" The stranger didn't answer right away. He finally stood, unfolding himself from the stool with deliberate slowness. Up close, he was taller than he'd appeared at first. His frame imposing, but his movements controlled. Emily could feel the tension crackle in the air like static. The man spoke again, his tone still calm. "You're scaring people. It's time you leave her alone." He nodded toward Emily. The leader sneered. "Or what?" The stranger's eyes didn't waver. "You don't want to find out." For the first time that night, the laughter faded from the thugs' faces. The younger two exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how far their leader would go. The leader chuckled again, but there was less confidence in it now. "You know who you're talking to?" "No," the stranger replied, "and I don't care." Emily's breath caught. She'd never seen anyone speak to the thug like that without trembling. The leader balled his fists, stepping closer, the smell of stale beer heavy on his breath. "Big mistake, old man. Big mistake." At that exact moment, a gust of wind rattled the diner's door, making the bell above it chime. The sound seemed to echo like a warning. The stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly reached for a napkin and wiped his hands. In the corner, the trucker leaned forward slightly as if anticipating what was about to happen. The scar-faced thug finally barked at his friends. "Get up. Let's show this guy he walked into the wrong place." The two younger thugs hesitated but slowly rose to their feet. Emily took a step back, heart pounding. She wanted to scream for someone to call the police, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. The stranger, however, simply took a step forward. "Last chance," he said softly. "Sit down, walk away, or I'll make you." If you were in Emily's place, would you warn the stranger to back off or trust him to handle the situation? Drop your thoughts below. We'd love to know how you'd react. The diner was silent again, save for the sound of rain pelting the windows. Nobody yet realized that the man in the leather jacket was Steven Seagal, and that the thugs had just provoked the wrong person. The rain outside turned to a steady drumbeat, as if the storm itself was waiting for what was about to unfold inside the diner. The bell above the door stopped jingling, the neon sign buzzed faintly, and for a few seconds, no one moved. Steven Seagal, though no one except a few wide-eyed college kids recognized him, stood tall and calm in the center of the diner's aisle. His stillness made the thugs uneasy, as if they were facing not just a man but something they couldn't quite read. The scar-faced leader took a step forward, cracking his knuckles like a warning. "You don't scare me, old man," he sneered. "I've dealt with worse." Steven didn't even blink. "Sit down," he repeated, his voice deep and controlled. "I'm not asking again." The leader smirked, trying to cover the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Or what? You gonna bore me to death with that calm voice of yours?" A nervous laugh came from one of the younger thugs, but it died quickly under Steven's steady gaze. Emily stood frozen behind the counter, gripping a damp towel in both hands, torn between calling the police and not wanting to provoke the thugs any further. "Hey," the leader barked at Emily. "You enjoying the show? Maybe you should get us another round of coffee before things get ugly." Steven stepped slightly to the side, putting himself directly between Emily and the gang. "Leave her alone," he said. The words were quiet but carried an unmistakable edge. The leader's smirk faltered. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by someone who looked like he'd just stepped out of the rain for a late-night cup of coffee. "Boys," the leader said, jerking his chin at his friends, "let's teach him some manners." The two younger thugs hesitated again, exchanging uneasy glances. One of them muttered, "Man, I don't know." "What's the matter?" the leader snapped. "He's just one guy." Steven sighed softly and shifted his stance, sliding one foot slightly back, a small, subtle motion that somehow made his presence even more imposing. The taller of the two younger thugs lunged first, swinging a sloppy punch aimed at Steven's jaw. In an instant, Steven's hand shot up, catching the thug's wrist mid-swing. Without breaking eye contact with the leader, he twisted the man's arm in one smooth, effortless motion, forcing him down onto one knee with a muffled grunt of pain. The college kids gasped. One of them whispered, "Oh my God." He didn't even move. The second thug hesitated for half a second too long, then charged, aiming a clumsy punch at Steven's ribs. Steven released the first thug's arm and pivoted just enough for the second man's punch to miss entirely. A quick, precise nudge with Steven's elbow sent him stumbling into the booth they had just vacated. Both attackers were now either on the floor or groaning against the vinyl seats. The diner went dead silent again. The storm outside rumbled like distant applause. The scar-faced leader's smirk was gone, replaced with a scowl that barely hid his shock. "You think you're tough?" he spat. "You don't know who you're messing with?" Steven tilted his head slightly, eyes locked on him. "Neither do you." The leader snarled and lunged, throwing a punch with all his weight behind it. Steven sidestepped as easily as if he'd been expecting it all along. In the same fluid motion, he guided the leader's momentum past him, letting the thug's own force send him crashing into the counter. Emily flinched but didn't move, her eyes wide in disbelief. The leader staggered back, clutching his side, humiliated and furious. "You're dead," he shouted, trying to regain his balance. Steven took one slow step forward, his voice dropping even lower. "Walk. Away." Something in the way he said it, the calm certainty, the complete lack of fear, made the younger thugs scramble to their feet and back toward the door. They were done. The leader looked from Steven to his friends, realizing he was now alone. He straightened as best he could, trying to salvage his pride. "This ain't over," he muttered, backing toward the exit. Steven didn't move, just watched as the trio stumbled out into the rain. The bell above the door jingled as it shut behind them. For a long moment, no one in the diner said a word. All that could be heard was the steady rainfall and the soft clinking of Emily's trembling hands as she set the towel down on the counter. Finally, the trucker in the corner let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be," he said. The college kids who had been recording the entire incident began whispering excitedly. "That's Steven Seagal," one of them whispered loudly, eyes wide. "I swear that's him." Emily blinked, staring at the man who had just saved her. "You're Steven Seagal?" she asked softly. Steven gave a small nod, almost embarrassed by the attention. "Just glad I could help," he said, brushing a drop of rain from his sleeve. Emily managed a shaky smile. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't walked in." Steven's expression softened slightly. "Nobody deserves to be treated that way," he said. "You stood your ground as best you could. That's brave." Emily felt her eyes sting with tears but quickly wiped them away, grateful that the nightmare was over. The diner slowly came back to life. The trucker returned to his meal, the college kid still buzzing about the scene they'd just witnessed. Emily refilled Steven's coffee, her hand steadier now. "It's on the house," she said. Steven gave her a small, respectful nod. "If you had been there, would you have stepped in like Steven Seagal or waited for the police? Let us know in the comments. Your opinion might surprise others." Outside, the storm began to ease, but inside the diner, the night felt a little brighter. The diner felt strangely quiet after the chaos, as if the walls themselves were catching their breath. Rain dripped from the awning outside in steady little streams, and the neon sign buzzed faintly in the silence. Steven Seagal returned to his seat at the counter as calm as if nothing had happened. He took another sip of his coffee, his posture relaxed but alert. Emily watched him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Her hands finally stopped trembling as she dried a freshly washed cup. The college kids, huddled together in the corner booth, were replaying the video they'd recorded on their phones. One of them whispered, "This is gonna blow up online. People won't believe it till they see it." The trucker, still sitting in his corner seat, finally spoke up, his deep voice carrying in the quiet room. "I've been driving cross-country for 20 years, he said, and I've never seen anyone shut down bullies that fast. That was something else." Emily smiled weakly but kept her focus on the man who'd stepped in to save her. "You didn't have to do that," she said to Steven softly. He gave a small shrug. "I couldn't just watch. Some people think they can push others around because they're scared inside. They only understand strength when they see it." Emily felt a lump form in her throat at his words. "You were incredible," she said. Steven glanced at her, his expression kind but modest. "You were brave, too. Not many people stand tall when they're outnumbered. You didn't break." A moment of silence passed between them, the kind that carried mutual respect rather than awkwardness. The college kid with the phone suddenly blurted out, "Hey, Mr. Seagal? That is you, right?" Steven turned his head slightly and gave a small, almost shy nod. "Yeah," he admitted. The kid's jaw dropped and he immediately elbowed his friend. "I told you it was him, I knew it," the trucker chuckled. "Explains a lot," he said, shaking his head with a grin. Emily's eyes widened slightly. "I've seen your movies," she said, her voice tinged with amazement. "I just never thought I'd meet you in a diner during a thunderstorm." Steven gave a rare half-smile. "Life's funny that way." Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled again. The sound made everyone tense for a heartbeat, but this time it was only 2 local police officers coming in, shaking off rainwater from their jackets. One of the officers approached the counter. "We got a call about a disturbance. Everything okay here?" Emily glanced at Steven and then nodded at the officer. "It's okay now. There were 3 men harassing me and the customers went, but this gentleman stepped in." The officer's gaze shifted to Steven, his eyes narrowing slightly as he recognized the face. "You're Steven Seagal," he said, a little surprised. Steven gave him a polite nod. "Just happened to be in the right place at the right time." The officer's partner glanced at the college kids. "You said you recorded it?" The college kid nodded eagerly. "Yeah, I got everything. Those guys were way out of line." "He saved her." The officer sighed with relief. "That'll help. We'll track them down." Emily exhaled, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease at the thought that the thugs wouldn't be coming back tonight. The officers thanked everyone for their cooperation and left, promising to patrol the area in case the troublemakers tried to return. As the door closed behind them, the diner seemed to regain a sense of normalcy. The trucker went back to his coffee and pie, the college kids started talking about posting the video, and Emily refilled Steven's cup one last time. "You know," Emily said quietly, "the way you stayed calm through all that. It was almost scarier than if you'd shouted." Steven chuckled lightly. "Anger makes you sloppy. Calm lets you control the room. I learned that a long time ago." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'll remember that." A few minutes later, the college kids were grinning at their phones. "It's already getting shares," one of them said excitedly. "This is going viral." Emily couldn't help but smile. "At least something good's coming out of tonight." Steven stood up, sliding a few bills across the counter to pay for his coffee despite Emily's protests. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just doing my part," he replied. He adjusted his jacket and gave Emily one last reassuring look. "Take care of yourself. Don't let people like that scare you. They only win if you give them that power." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you for everything," she said sincerely. Steven gave a slight nod, then turned and walked toward the door. As he opened it, the rain had eased to a soft drizzle, and the streetlights outside reflected off the wet pavement. The bell above the door jingled one final time as he stepped out into the night, his silhouette framed by the glow of the diner's neon sign. For a long moment after he left, no one spoke. Emily looked around at the other customers, the trucker, the college kids, and they all seemed to share the same unspoken thought. They had just witnessed something rare. Emily glanced at the now empty stool where Steven had been sitting and felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed both outside and inside the diner. If you were in Emily's shoes, what would you say to Steven Seagal after that night? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear them. That night, the video recorded by the college kids made its way to social media. By morning, millions of people would see how a calm, fearless stranger stepped in to defend a waitress when she needed it most. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the storm had cleared, leaving behind wet streets that shimmered under the early light. Inside the diner, Emily was already back at work pouring coffee for the morning regulars as if it were just another day. But her phone kept buzzing on the counter. She finally checked it during a lull and nearly dropped it. Her social media feed was flooded with messages. The college kids' video from the night before had already hit hundreds of thousands of views overnight, and the comments were pouring in faster than she could scroll. This is the kind of hero the world needs right now. Respect to Steven Seagal for stepping up without violence. Emily stayed strong. What a brave waitress. Those thugs picked the wrong diner. Emily couldn't help but smile. The video showed not just Steven's calm, but also the fear she'd tried to hide behind her forced smile that night. Reading the supportive comments felt like a weight being lifted. People saw what she went through and stood by her. At another table, the trucker from the night before came in for his usual breakfast. "Heard you're famous now," he teased with a grin. Emily laughed softly. "Not me. Steven's the one everyone's talking about. I just happened to be there." The trucker shook his head. "Nah, you're part of the story. You kept your cool. That matters." Meanwhile, halfway across town, Steven Seagal was sitting quietly in his hotel room, sipping tea and scrolling through the same video. His face stayed unreadable, but there was a flicker of something like pride in his eyes when he saw how Emily had stood her ground. Reporters were already reaching out to the diner for interviews, and by lunchtime a local news van pulled up outside. Emily felt nervous at first, but decided that telling the story might inspire others not to feel helpless in the face of bullying. During the short interview, she said, "I didn't think anyone would step in. But Steven didn't just save me. He reminded everyone that it's possible to stand up for what's right without losing your calm." The news clip spread just as fast as the original video. Soon, national outlets were picking it up with headlines like, "Hollywood star steps in to save waitress from harassment," "Steven Seagal's calm confrontation goes viral," "A late-night diner," "A storm and an unlikely hero by evening." The video had crossed 5 million views. Celebrities and influencers started sharing it with hashtags like #respect and stand up for others. Emily's boss, Ralph, who had been hiding in the kitchen during the incident, apologized to her that afternoon. "I should have stepped in too," he admitted awkwardly. Emily smiled and shook her head. "We were all scared, but at least someone wasn't." Later that night, as the diner grew quiet again, Emily sat at one of the booths after her shift and scrolled through the comments on the viral post. She found herself reading one particular comment aloud in a whisper. "Courage isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about standing still, speaking up, and not letting fear win." Those words stuck with her. Steven, on the other hand, had already left town. He wasn't one for the spotlight. And once he knew Emily was safe and the police had caught the thugs, he moved on without fanfare. Emily thought about that as she locked up the diner that night. Looking out at the street where the rain had fallen so hard the night before, she felt a new kind of strength settle in her chest. If you believe we need more people who stand up quietly but powerfully against bullies, type respect in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. The incident remained a trending topic for days, not because of violence, but because of the calm courage one man showed when it mattered most, and how that courage inspired millions to believe in doing the right thing. Emily knew she'd never forget that stormy night. Not because she was afraid, but because it proved to her, and to millions watching online, that decency can still win, even in the darkest moments.